We have invited Andy Fordice to share the US experience and knowledge of the Enlist system. So thanks, Andy, for being with us today. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, it's great to be with you guys here today and just share some thoughts with the Canadian team from the US perspective with the Enlist Weed Control System and the success that we've had with it. I'm Andy Fordice, and I've been the portfolio marketing leader for our trait herbicide business in the US. So that's accountability for all Enlist herbicides, Enlist One and Enlist Duo, as well as our other trait herbicides, our glyphosate business, as well as Fexapan in the US. I've been involved with Enlist since 2011 or 2012, as intimately involved with our launch in our the Enlist Weed Control System in cotton, across the cotton belt in the South, our first traded crop. So been with Enlist for a very long time and excited to see where it is today.
Good, but before we dive in the Enlist system, let's start, well, with an heavy and complicated question, but could you summarize the weed resistance situation and history in the United States?
It's a great question. It's a complicated history and one that goes back quite a long time. So in the mid 90s, Roundup changed the game, right? And the Roundup Ready trait system, and it allowed farmers to farm a way they've never been able to really do before. And they used that system to its fullest. But we really got away from a lot of the principles that kept weed resistance at bay. We became reliant on a glyphosate-only system, really across all our major crops, cotton, corn, soybeans, across the U.S. And 10, 12 years ago now, we started to see resistance pop up because of just the single use of glyphosate over the course of time. And it really started in the southern U.S. and in our cotton markets, but it is really predominant across multiple different weed species, really, and across several different states in the U.S., from pigweed to water hemp to mare's tail. The resistant weeds that are to glyphosate are prevalent everywhere. And the Enlist Weed Control System allows farmers to continue farming the way they want to farm. We still have the glyphosate trait that's available in E3, but bringing in 2,4-D and particularly 2,4-D choline, as well as glufosinate, gives farmers multiple options for different modes of action. And when you combine that with solid stewardship and residual chemistry, we can keep fields just as clean as a farmer needs to keep them clean to produce top yields.
So what would be the estimated percentage of Enlist acres, and of those acres, what percentage would be sprayed with the technology?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we really launched the Enlist E3 system in the United States when we received Chinese and Philippines import approvals, our last import approvals prior to the 2019 season. So we had, by the time we got approvals, it was already late winter going into early spring, but we got a few million acres of E3 out in the marketplace in 2019, which helped escalate our demand and usage into 2020. In 2020 in soybeans, we had roughly 20% of the U.S. soybean market was planted to Enlist E3 soybeans. 20% of our market, just for round numbers, if there's 85 million acres of soybeans in the U.S., that was 17 million acres of E3 soybeans that were planted in the U.S. In addition to that, Phytogen cottonseed is our brand of cotton, and there was a couple million acres of cotton out there as well that had the Enlist E3 soybean trait. And again, about 20+% of the market was planted to Enlist cotton as well. And as we go forward into 2021, we're projecting that at a minimum, we're going to see 30% of the market in the U.S. go to Enlist E3, maybe as much as 50%, depending on individual territory and market. And of those acres, what we've seen consistently since we launched Enlist in cotton and into soybeans is we're treating 75, 80% of those acres with Enlist herbicides today. Our number one product we use in the U.S. is Enlist One, and really different regulatory reasons than what you'd have in the Canadian market. We have a tank mix website we have to use regulatory wise, and Enlist One is you can just get far more tank mix products with it in the U.S. than you can with Enlist Duo. But just tremendous success, and a lot of growers utilizing the technology and then spraying Enlist herbicides over it. It's a number one choice for them.
And how was initially the technology perceived by grower? Because like kind of the market gaps maybe to resistant weeds, like can you dive in a little bit there?
Yeah, so the technology initially, people are like, man, well, we've been using 2,4-D for, my grandpa used it 40, 50, 60 years ago, right? So that, there's a certain level of comfort around 2,4-D, particularly around soybeans versus dicamba, where, I mean, we've all seen the sensitivity to dicamba here the last several years, and that was evident even before we launched the system. But growers, there's been a certain comfort level with 2,4-D and how people have been using it through the years. And then we had to do even though there was that comfort level there, we still have embarked on a tremendous education and stewardship initiative to inform growers that, look, our 2,4-D choline that you find in our Enlist herbicides isn't the same as an amine or an ester. Right, the volatility is near zero. You got low potential for physical drift, and with Colex D, that's made that happen. And once we've proved it to growers that it's no kidding a different type of 2,4-D, that's really helped escalate our spray rate, and off-target movement incidents of Enlist across the U.S. are really incredibly small, right? But the biggest testament I would say to that is you don't really see any news articles about 2,4-D drift like you do with dicamba, right? I mean, it's been pretty quiet, and we've been on millions of acres since we've launched. So the chemistry is doing exactly what it needs to do, and the growers have really adopted it well, and a lot of that's thanks to our R&D group and technology there, but also the tremendous education and stewardship efforts that have happened to make that go.
Because you mentioned cotton earlier quite often, and it's a big market in the US, and I understand that cotton is very sensitive to 2,4-D, way more sensitive than soybean is.
Yes.
Here in Eastern Canada, it's more of the IP soybean market that is very important. So we will see an IP soybean field next to Enlist soybean field. So could you speak to some known example of like neighboring crop situation or?
Sure, absolutely. So in across our cotton market, there's round numbers, 10 to 12 million acres of cotton in any given year, right? I mean, the market fluctuates depending on commodity prices because those farmers in the South can plant cotton or peanuts or soybeans or corn. So depending on the market price, there's quite a bit of volatility in the acres. But as you mentioned, cotton is incredibly sensitive to 2,4-D. As an example, cotton is the 2,4-D as dicamba is the soybeans. I mean, it's that sensitive. So what we have to do in particular in the South, and we've been incredibly successful with this because, like I said a little bit earlier, about 20% or so of the market has planted Enlist cotton. That means 80% of the market is non-Enlist cotton, which is the overwhelming majority of it out there, which is highly susceptible to 2,4-D. So that's 8-9 million acres of non-Enlist cotton. And when you go to Lubbock, Texas, that's where roughly half of the U.S. cotton market resides, is in the area around Lubbock, Texas, which is very flat country, incredibly windy country out there as well, and it's cotton on cotton year after year. We've found success with Enlist because of the properties of 2,4-D choline, of how it will stay down, and it has low potential for physical drift, ultra low volatility, but you still have to keep common sense and use the label, right? I mean, if the wind is blowing towards a sensitive crop, like non-Enlist cotton, that's a do not spray. I mean, there is no buffer that will save you, right? I mean, it is a do not spray scenario if the wind is blowing towards a sensitive crop. Now, if that wind is blowing away from that sensitive crop, then you can spray. It's no problem. And we've not had incidences where a grower has sprayed when the wind was blowing away from a non-Enlist cotton, and it's volatilized and gone back to that adjacent crop that was, I guess, upwind, if you will. So if we can do it in cotton and stay out of the newspapers, I'm confident in what you'll be able to do in Canada around your sensitive crops. Just simply make sure the wind's not blowing towards it. You're using the right labeled nozzles, and you'll be in great shape, because the chemistry, it's amazing what it will do and how different it is than amines and esters.
We'll be in great shape to kill those hard to kill weeds.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
like for us, I'm thinking of Waterham is getting hotter and hotter by the, well, we have now group 27, which is mesotrione, so it's quite new for us in Eastern Canada now. I'm thinking Canada fleabane, ragweed. With the drought this last year, lamb's quarter was a hard one to kill too. So can you share your experience of the Enlist systems, like on few specific weeds?
Yeah, so 2,4-D does a great job on all those, but you know, the system's more than just 2,4-D too. I mean, just like we talked about at the intro, if we just go to a straight Enlist system where you use Enlist One or Enlist Duo, while Enlist Duo is great because you get 2 active ingredients in a convenience of one jug, but if we rely strictly on that, we're right back to the drawing board. So that's the beauty of the E3 system. You've got 2,4-D, you've got glyphosate, and you've got glufosinate in your back pocket to be able to incorporate multiple modes of action on that farm. So while Enlist and herbicides are terrific tools, we have to be cognizant, and we're doing this in the U.S., of continuing to use multiple modes of action so that we can keep weeds at bay and fields clean, and to make sure that the longevity of the trait is there, because there's really nothing to date that's quickly approaching behind it in terms of another trait solution, right? So we got to keep this one viable, and the way to do it is with multiple modes of action for sound resistance management. So doesn't matter what the weed species is, if it's lamb's quarters or mare's tail, Palmer amaranth, whatever, multiple modes of action is the way. 2,4-D is an incredible product, and Enlist One and Enlist Duo can do a great job, but they shouldn't shoulder that burden all on their own. They need other products out there too to help keep the longevity of the chemistry viable for a long time.
Yeah, let's learn from that glyphosate introduction situation.
Absolutely.
So I understand, like, there's a lot, it's a success, like the Enlist system in the US, a lot of licensees, a lot of offer. So to kind of wrap up all this good information, like, why do you think Enlist system has been such a success in the US and is continuing to be a success?
Yeah, so licensees, I mean, certainly every Corteva brand is carrying Enlist E3 soybeans, but we have a little over 120 different licensees in the US that have taken a license to Enlist E3 that are selling it in the marketplace today. And that's a key reason why we think we can get to at least 30% of the market to plant Enlist E3 soybeans in 2020. Again, maybe as much as 50%, depending on the individual geography that you're in. But why have those licensees taken to it? Well, it's grower level demand, right? I mean, their customers are saying, this is what I want to plant, right? And why are they saying that? Because through the last couple of years, and then the demand that was built even before we had all the appropriate import approvals, the trait does, and the chemistry that supports it does exactly what we said it was going to do. And I mean, that's maybe it's an incredible thing to think about, right? That we're delivering the promise, right? And the expectation that was there, that was really high, but we're delivering on that. And the chemistry solutions that we have with Enlist herbicides in the U.S. are a fundamental reason why the Enlist trait is successful, because the chemistry is doing what it was designed to do. And there's a lot of dicamba hangover in the U.S., right? And headaches that's come from that. And the Enlist system, from a regulatory perspective, it just doesn't have the headaches, and growers just don't want to deal with that anymore. And the ability to have the freedom to spray, not having to worry about cutoff dates, having additives to a tank to help reduce drift and volatility. I mean, the chemistry does what it said it was going to do, and that's why we've been successful in the U.S. And not to mention the other trait components with it, with Liberty and glufosinate and glyphosate. It's just a complete package that farmers have really adopted, and they like it. And that's been what's successful for it, is because the growers that plant the trait like the trait. They like what they've seen with the chemistry, and that's just had our licensees gobble up as much seed supply as they can, so that we can get it planted on as many acres as possible. So major stewardship effort, a lot of education, doesn't happen overnight, but we've had a lot of things that's gone into that, and a lot of people on the team that help make it the success that it is. And we really look forward to a strong 2021 growing season, which will just make that acreage expectation even higher in 2022.
Awesome. This is a lot of very good information, very good knowledge. I think we're going to use that for our own stewardship and a learning process. So it is much appreciated.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your expertise with us today, Andy. Any last word of advice?
No, good luck to you. We certainly wish you the best. And we know that based on the experience that we've had in the U.S. really since the launch of Enlist Cotton in 2012 or 13, that if we can do it there, and then we can be as successful on tens of millions of acres in the Midwest on soybeans, that you can certainly do it too in Canada. So, and we'll be watching, right? And rooting for your success along the way. So good luck to you.
Thanks.
Yes. Thank you.